Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Get a Grip podcast presented by Pinehurst Resorts. Timely, by the way. Amazing U.S. Open we just had. And, of course, Pinehurst is going to be going back 2029, along with U.S. Women's Opens in 2035, 41, and again in 2047. And for those interested in some golf at Pinehurst, for the first time in nearly 3 decades, Pinehurst opened its first original golf course as it unveiled Pinehurst number 10 in the spring of 2024, designed by Tom Doak. Number 10 features dramatic elevation changes, natural sandy areas. I know you got a lot of that on TV this past week at number 2, and remnants of early 20th century sand mining operation. You can also see that in their great logo. Plan your next golf trip today at pinehurst.com. Andrew Putnam, I'm assuming you watched some golf over the weekend. Pinehurst was popping. Pinehurst was great. What were your thoughts about the U.S. Open?
Yeah, it was a very entertaining U.S. Open. I mean, the course showed really well on TV and looked brutal out there. I mean, I was, obviously it's always sad not to be playing the U.S. Open, but part of me was like, man, it looks so tough. I'm glad I didn't have to hit some of those shots and was enjoying watching them. But, man, what a great finish, great ending. I'm not sure what more you wanted.
Are you, you're trying to get into the U.S. Open. Obviously, you go through qualifying and, you have a chance to get there. You've played in U.S. Opens before. You mentioned the disappointment not being there. Does it push you away from watching, or do you still dive in? I mean, obviously, I know you've got a relationship with Bryson's Caddie, who we might have as a special guest here in a little bit. But do you still love watching it? Do you still dive into it, or you kind of take, Thursday through Sunday, personal time, spend some time with the family, stuff like that?
No, I love it. I mean, it's our national open. There's 4 weeks a year that I would watch golf, like be glued to the TV. It's usually Masters, US Open, British, and PGA. Those are all, it's just fun to see what's going on in the world of golf. I'm still a fan of golf. I play it and love it. And especially the US Open, there's just so much carnage. It's fun as a player to watch these, players battle through it. I know what they're going through, and very entertaining week in golf, a lot more than some of the others we play.
All right, I want to get your insight into a couple of moments that happened on Sunday, because obviously you have the heartbreak of Rory McIlroy, and then you have the triumphant kind of finish from Bryson DeChambeau, who, by the way, Andrew, didn't play great on Sunday. I think that's been one of those things that's been forgotten considering what happened on those final 3 holes, but Bryson didn't quite have it, especially off the tee in that final round, yet he still gets it done, which I always look at as kind of a check mark when you talk about great players. But I want to start with Rory, because Rory misses a couple short putts. Obviously, the very short one on 16 didn't have a lot of movement. You could kind of see if you watch those replays. I'll call it a flinchy stroke, just because I don't really know how else you could kind of explain what happened. Never had missed a 3-footer all season. So, listen, we've all missed short putts. I've missed plenty of short putts in my tournament days. I'm assuming you've missed short putts in your tournament days. You missed that short putt on 16 again. Seems like a relatively easy putt to make, if you take yourself out of the circumstances and the situation. You get to 18 after, by the way, he buried a great par save from 4.5 feet on 17. And you get to 18 and you hit that pitch shot, and you've got, 3.5 feet when the ball's obviously moving outside the hole left to right. Is that the scariest thing to run into after you've missed a short putt that didn't have a lot of movement? The next one coming up is one you might have to play as a right-hander outside the hole left, downhill, kind of moving away from you?
It's terrifying. If you were watching at the green speeds out there, that's one thing that, we played pretty fast greens Memorial the week before, and I'm a pretty good putter. I typically don't ever miss 3-footers, but I missed a couple, like those sliders downhill. And the thing is, when the greens are that fast, any flinch or any movement in your hands on those putts and the ball is going to miss. And so you just have to be that much more perfect. Usually when the greens are running 11 or 12s, you have a little more room for error, but you're making such a small stroke. It is really tough to control that putter face. And I felt like the putt on 18 was actually a pretty good putt. Smiley Kaufman was up there reading it. He's like, he was giving his commentary and said he can play this inside the hole, like left edge, and he played it like a cup out, on a 4-footer.
At least a cup out. It was so far out.
It really wasn't that bad of a putt. The one on 16 was, obviously a little flinchy or whatever you'd call it, but 18 wasn't too bad. It's just his chip shot really, man, you can't leave the ball above the hole on that one. That was a pretty poor chip shot because he has, perfect position uphill all the way to the hole. But man, that was tough to watch.
I remember I worked with Brad Faxon for a long time when I was at Fox, and one of the things Brad used to talk about, Brad is obviously heralded as one of the great putters of all time. And I found something Brad said one time really interesting. He said when he was really playing great golf, he would try to leave pitch shots and chip shots to give himself the easiest putt at par. And of course, pro golfers, if you have an easy pitch shot, you're trying to make it, or you have one up the hill, not super fast greens, not playing a U.S. Open, you're trying to hole it. You don't really care the comebacker. But if you're playing U.S. Open level greens, you've got to think about that next putt. And I'm with you. I mean, you want to hit that right and short. And I was doing the math as Bryson was in the bunker and hit that brilliant shot we'll talk about in a minute. It was only 2 inches longer than Rory's putt. Rory was 3 feet 9 inches. Bryson was 3 feet 11 inches. But Andrew, these are totally different putts. I mean, Bryson could get extremely aggressive with that putt, not have to worry about the next one. And for Rory, considering when you listen to accounts of people on the ground, Rory was paying a ton of attention to what Bryson was doing. He would look back on tee shots and see where the ball was. I think you and I both sitting there where Bryson was under that tree and then pitching into that bunker, you're sitting there thinking, he's going to make 5. And I'm assuming for Rory, he probably had something similar in his head. And I feel like if he felt like he had to make 4 to have a chance at a playoff or win the U.S. Open, he might have hit that putt a little bit more aggressive. The thing is that where he left it, to your point, he couldn't have got aggressive with that putt, because you get aggressive with that putt, you might hit that thing 7, 8, 9 feet by.
Yeah, I mean, it just was one of those things where probably paying a little too much attention to what Bryson's doing. I mean, it's hard when you know. It's hard when you know, like, hey, maybe a par could win the U.S. Open. You always want to be playing more aggressive as a golfer. Once you're thinking like, I can limp this thing in, or that's just a bad headspace to be in. I mean, we've probably all been in that spot in sports, feeling like you just need to run the shot clock out or make a couple pars coming in. It's just the worst mindset to be in. And I'm sure Rory paying attention probably didn't help.
It reminded me a lot, I've been covering golf for a long time. It reminded me a lot of Adam Scott when he had a chance to win that Open Championship, 10, 12 years ago, and bogeyed his last 4 holes, and Ernie went on to win by a shot. Rory's finish kind of reminded me of that. He makes bogey on 15. I felt like he might have hit the wrong club there. It felt like it was an 8 iron, and he hit 7 iron and kind of hit it a little low, and honestly had to make a brilliant bogey save there just to make 4. Then bogey 16 with the 3 putt when he hit it to 25 feet. Kind of did the hard part at that point on that par 4. Honestly, Andrew could have bogeyed 17. I mean, he had to hit a really, really good bunker shot there. Yeah. Kind of short-sided left there at 17, able to save par, and then, of course, bogey's 18. So my comp, you've heard a lot of Vandeveld thrown around and Scott Hoke and stuff like that. My comp is really Adam Scott at the Open Championship when he bogeyed the last 4 holes to lose by 1. Now, we've talked about Rory. And I want to say this. A lot of people in my world, me, some of the No Lane Up guys, Andy Johnson, the Fried Egg crew, a lot of us are Rory fans because Rory is our guy. He's our generational guy. I'm 40 years old. Rory's a little bit younger than me, but we obviously rooted for Tiger, but we were very young when we were rooting for Tiger. This generation, and who I have watched grow up in the sport, is Rory McIlroy. And so it's very easy for me to root for Rory. That being said, and I wrote a lot of this about Bryson, it's been very fun to watch whatever transformation we've seen from Bryson DeChambeau, not just on the golf course, but it seems like just understanding life a little bit more. We all grow up and we all become a little bit more comfortable in our own skin. Watching Bryson's interactions in the crowd, watching the way Bryson kind of checks out of moments during an important moment in his career was very unique and very different. You don't see a lot of players do that. I mean, a lot of comps to Phil Mickelson. But Andrew, Bryson, the golfer, outside of the driving, outside of the incredible distance, the short game all week was remarkable. It was really cool that it came down to a short game shot for Bryson to win this U.S. Open.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Greg was even mentioning how good his short game has gotten recently, and he plays those wedges that are, I think, the same length of what is 7 iron or something, and
yep.
I don't understand how he can really do that. I mean, that seems so tough because adding that extra length, I don't know. I just would feel not very comfortable in my hands trying to hit some of those short game shots. But Greg's always talked about how good a short game was, how sneaky. People don't talk about it a whole lot, and he's been chipping it really well, and obviously showed up in the final round because, man, his driver was. It's like I was watching the whole, watched him, and I just couldn't get the ball in the fairway. He obviously got one in the fairway on 16, that long par 4. That was
but
huge.
that was close. I mean, that was close. Like it was very close to not being in the fairway again, right? I think that might have been his only fairway hit on the back nine outside of obviously driving 13. I think that was the only one. So yeah, I mean, they were all pretty tied to the corners.
Yeah, no, and I mean, we probably need to talk about him switching drivers prior to his final round. Maybe something we asked Greg about. I mean, that's as a caddy, it's probably nothing more stressful than seeing your player switching clubs.
Have you ever done anything like that? Have you ever changed clubs within a tournament?
I can't remember a time I've ever done that, but listening to Bryson in his interview after talking about how something about the bulge in the face might have changed a little bit. I mean, the only way I was rationalizing was that he cracked his driver and it broke. Because why in the world would you ever switch? I mean, he was hitting his driver pretty great the day before. You know, him and Rory were both just making that course look pretty easy. Yeah, I mean, his short game was clutch. I mean, obviously the last hole is something everyone's gonna be talking about, but there's a handful of chips before that he just, came up clutch.
The thing I say a lot about you guys, when I say you guys, I mean pro golfers, is when I play with pros, I'm always reminded at how little you guys will say nice shot or good shot. And it's not you guys are being rude. It's just you need to hit an amazing shot to kind of get acknowledgement from pro golfers. I mean, a wedge to 25 feet, you guys aren't going to be impressed by that. But a remarkable pitch shot or par save or great wedge shot to a tight hole location, you'll get love. On the 8th hole, and I was watching the Sky Sports feed, and Rich Beam was saying if you remember, Bryson hit it a mile off the planet on 8. And he had to hit an amazing shot to get it in the worst spot at Pinehurst. Like, it was a horrible place to be, long and left on the 8th, and that pin was tucked back left. And he hit that pitch shot, and you see Pavone gave him a thumbs up. And, I always say that's such an acknowledgement of how good the shot was when your playing partner, especially, the final pairing on a Sunday to U.S. Open, Pavone's giving you the thumbs up at how good the shot was. And then, of course, he makes the 18, 20-footer to save par. But I'm with you. I think both Rory and Bryson, because of the ability to drive the golf ball, both long and for the most part, both very, very straight. I know Bryson got a little squirrely with the driver and Rory missed some fairways late as well. But these guys hit it, 340, 350 and hit a lot of fairways. I mean, it's an incredible combination of speed and ability to kind of, centralize the face, if you will, level the face on the ball so often, considering the club head speed so high. But both those guys never get enough credit for the pitching. And I just thought all week long, the chipping, the up and downs from Rory and Bryson were a good reminder that to be one of the best in the world, you can't have one skill set that's great. You can't have two skill sets that are great. You've got to have a complete bag that's awesome. And I feel like Bryson this year, Andrew, has reminded the golf world that he's more than kind of this sideshow dude that can carry it 380 if he wants to.
Yeah. I mean, those greens probably are some of the most scary greens to chip on, just watching on TV. And I know those pins are a lot kind of right on the edge of the grain where it's into the grain, then down the grain. And that's some of the hardest, just visually, because, it looks like the pin just on an island and there's nothing past it. And so, I mean, your technique better be dialed in. Your confidence better be higher. You're going to be watching it, you saw so many guys just chunking the ball and, even some basic shots. It's the visual. It's so hard to commit and to have that distance control. The only chip I really saw Bryson miss hit was when he made double, towards the end of his round on Saturday. Besides that, I mean, I don't know. He pretty much didn't have a huge mistake like that the whole entire tournament.
The scrambling was just remarkable. And that obviously takes us to the 72nd hole. And, I've caddied professionally before. I've played enough golf with you guys to understand that you go about your business to avoid places on a golf course that could lead to bogey, double, triple, and beyond. The thing pro golfers, like everybody else in the world, doesn't want to see is a bunker shot from 40 to 60 yards. You just don't want to have it. You can chunk it, you can blade it. It can make you guys look mortal, right? That's the thing about those level of golf shots. When he was in that bunker, Andrew, did you think he was going to make par?
I didn't realize it was 50 yards away. That's what was sneaky. Like when I was watching it, it looked like maybe like a 30-yard bunker shot. I don't know, it's hard to tell.
I agree.
And I'm like, okay, he's got a little downslope and then an upslope, which can make it easier, But once they're explaining that after the round, I mean, shoot, the hardest thing on that is just your contact, especially with the pressure and everything, is like, man, just not getting a little nervy and blasting it over the green with how much power he has. I mean, it was one of the best shots we've ever seen at the end of a U.S. Open.
You got to just hit it so close to the ball. I mean, to be able to pull off that level of golf shot, I mean, those bunkers are not typical tour bunkers. Pinehurst is not a place that has the same sand across the board and the same level of depth. The bunkers there are almost like you're in Scotland, where it's meant to be a penalty. He had to hit that so close to the ball, and if you take that on, you could send it into the restaurant over the green and make double and lose the U.S. Open. So to me, it was just such a gutsy. We see gutsy iron shots into tuck pins late. I mean, you think about Ricky Fowler at the Players years ago, right? Takes it right of the flagstick there on 17. I mean, that's a gutsy line to take. I felt like Bryson on Saturday at 17, took it right at the flag there. That's a gutsy swing. But I don't feel like we lean into gutsy a lot when you talk about bunker shots or pitch shots. That was a guy that was saying, I'm going to win or lose the U.S. Open right here with this one swing.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy just to chunk that thing short of the green and kind of end up where Rory is, And but he kind of knew what he had to do, I guess, and pulled it off. I mean, incredible.
It was incredible. So again, the time you've kind of spent watching golf versus playing golf, where does that rank in terms of entertaining majors for you over the last, let's say, decade? Let's say the last 10, 12 years, the back and forth, two of the biggest names in the sport. Where does that kind of rank in terms of one of your favorite majors to pay attention to?
That's pretty high up. I mean, you had two of the most entertaining players playing the game right now, both kind of head to head. I mean, the only knock I would say on it was it felt like they were, McIlroy was playing pretty good. He was rolling the putter well, but Bryson kind of felt like he was just trying to keep it together. I mean, praying for good lies in the rough. So it was a different style of U.S. Open golf. I mean, typically when you're hitting it in the rough, you don't have anything you're pitching out. So in that aspect, it wasn't like he was, you're getting both players at their best on a Sunday coming down the stretch, but you had two of the most entertaining guys in golf, most loved guy, McIlroy. You could tell the TV cast was really pulling for him to win. There's a little bias going on there. And so in that terms, it was probably the best in the last 5-10 years I've watched. I mean, there's been some Masters, with Phil winning and Tiger that were pretty incredible, on back nine on Sunday. It's hard to beat Augusta, but it's one of the best majors we've had in a while. Good for the game.
I can't. I wrote this on Friday. I was just sitting there thinking, what better place to put these two guys up against each other than this golf course that kind of continually tests so many parts of your game. I was surprised at how little the players were putting from off the green. It felt like you saw them pull wedges more than I kind of thought we'd see throughout the week, but I think that was also fun to see. I mean, I think when guys pull putter every single time and it's like straight to the bag putter and there's really no creativity involved in the decision making, I think that at times can take away from the fun of a place like Pinehurst. And I think we'll see that, next month at Troon. You're going to see putters from off the green most of the time. But I loved that off the green, it felt like pitching or chipping was an option, right? I mean, you saw Rory do it on 18, the 72nd hole. And as you said, I mean, you saw Bryson do it most of the week, especially there at the 8th. I like the fact that it didn't just turn into a putter from off the green contest. I thought that was more fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, you had to have every shot out there. It definitely tested every single aspect of the game. And, the luck of the draw with going into the desert. I mean, fun for a week, it was entertaining, and probably wouldn't want to have every U.S. Open be like that, but it looked like it'd be a fun course to play. You had definitely had an option once you got off the fairway to maybe get to the green and having the right contact out of that sand to hold those small little turtleback shell greens. I mean, I'm sure it was stressing those players out, trying to figure out, where the ball was going to go more than the viewers out at home. So, it looked like a great course on TV. I really want to go and check it out. I've never played it since the redo, so I'm hoping to get out there at some point.
I got good news. We know some people through this podcast. Also, we know a guy that just jumped in the lobby. Let's see if we can get Greg online here. There he is.
Here we are.
The man that is not as bleary-eyed as I expected he would be. Greg, what's up, man? How are you?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for the invite. But yeah, I'm a little low on sleep right now, but at the same time, I'm back in Kirkland for a couple of days. Bryson said this is before he won the U.S. Open too, but I got a family at home in a 3 week stretch, so I'm back at home for a couple of days and heading out to Nashville tomorrow morning.
Well, first of all, congrats. It was
Thanks.
we just spent Andrew and I just spent 25 minutes talking about the final round and back and forth. I think the if we were ever going to say there was a bummer about that final round, it was the fact that you weren't playing alongside Rory, just because it was such a great back and forth. But I wanted to start early in the week last week with you and Bryson. When you guys got to Pinehurst #2, were you guys going through practice rounds, going through your prep? Did it feel like a golf course that fit y'all's game, that fit y'all's game plan, that fit what Bryson does so well?
Yeah, I would say I heard a lot of chatter, just that maybe it wouldn't be because he's hits a lot of drivers. It's kind of you don't know what you're going to get out of the rough, just for a lot of different reasons. But I always was optimistic because there's more room out there than I expected. You see Pinehurst and you hear about a Keimer, those kind of guys winning, and you're like, okay, it doesn't. I mean, Martin Keimer and Bryce, like Keimer's an incredible player, guy's going to be in the Hall of Fame, all that. But like they play golf very differently. Like one hits a low squealing fade, and Bryson's just hitting moon shots that draw. So I wasn't exactly sure what to expect, but I knew two things. I knew that he can hit a lot of drivers, which was great. Anytime he can hit driver, we're 45 yards ahead of everyone else for the most part. And I knew that he could spin the crap out of the ball. Like he has a spin issue, if anything. That's why everyone always talks about his lofts and like, oh, his 9-iron's actually the 8-iron. And I'm like, well, his 9-iron that's lofted like a 7.5-iron spins more than everyone else's regular 9-irons. So it's like that's the only reason why he does that. And so I was looking forward to this week because one of the few weeks where it's like, look, you can just hit. If we're in between a club, you can't chip it, and you just hit one less and hit as hard as you can. And a lot of the times that worked out. There's a couple of times. I gave him a great club on #6, even on the par three. He even asked me, he's like, "Are you sure this is enough?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure." And it landed right in the front edge and came back like into the bowl. I was like, but in that instance, you can't chip. You can't chip like a 9-iron up there and have it land pin high, and you're just going to go into the back bunker or have some weird putt down that slope. So yeah, for those reasons, I love the generosity you gave him off the tee or the option to push it up, and I also love the fact that he wasn't going to have a problem spinning it on those greens.
All right, we got to get right to it. I mean, prior to the round, we were watching on Golf Channel and we saw he was screwing around with an equipment change. I mean, as a caddy, how nerve-wracking is that? I mean, he obviously drove it really well on Saturday. I mean, I was watching the metrics. Him and Rory were hitting it like 360 every single hole down the middle of the fairway.
Yeah,
I mean, as a caddy, how quickly are you wanting to just take that new driver head and throw it in the trash, or was there actually an issue with the face? I mean, it's hard to argue with Bryson and equipment; he knows it better than anyone.
Yeah, my
thoughts?
true honest answer is like I wasn't worried at all, and I'll tell you why. There's a couple of reasons, but the biggest thing is since using the crank driver, he's probably gone through. I don't know. It's no less than 25. It's probably not more than 40 heads. Like so everyone's so used to using the same head, yeah. Like Andrew, you probably use the same head for months, if not years. So because of how hard he hits it, I actually have a driver head right here. I don't know if you guys can see, but like the curvature on the face, it's like a little more rounded right here. So what happened is he hit a few drives, and so this is 13 minutes before we're supposed to walk over, hits a couple of drives and the spin rate goes up a little bit. He's like, okay. I see him thinking. I'm like, oh, this is weird. And then he hits a couple left, couple right, and he just looks at his manager, Connor. He's like, Connor, new head. And I'm like, I was
13 minutes before, Greg. This is like,
yeah.
You guys are like hitting 3 more balls and going to the tee.
We have 4 more minutes till we have to walk off. And he gets his gauge out. He has this little curvature thing that measures the bulge and roll of the face, which I'm sure you guys have heard that term by now. But basically, he has this little gadget that has a slightly curved edge. It's like a little metal thing, and he puts it on it, and usually it's flush to the face. And that's 8 bulge and roll, 8 inches of bulge and roll. That's a whole nother conversation as far as how that's measured. But he put that on, and there was a little gap between. Right in the middle of the face, there's a tiny little gap in the gauge. And so he knew that his driver had flattened a little bit. And it's happened several times before. And there's been several times that he's thrown in a new head. Maybe he goes through a couple. And with the way that Bryson swings it, it's like he needs, if he doesn't have that curvature on the face, it's a lot harder for him to hit it straight and have the right spin. So what we've learned, once that spin starts to usually go up and it goes a little right or left, that the head's probably, it's time to go. And sure enough, he measured it. And so right after he measured it is when he was like, new head. And he hit 3 balls with a different head. He hit 3 balls with a second head, and the third head, or the fourth, however you want to look at it, performed pretty well, but it was a 5-degree driver, not a 5.5 degree. So anyways, as we all know, like the more loft you have on a club, even if it's 2.5 of a degree, when you're swinging it at 127 miles an hour club head speed, those little fractions of a difference make sense, even whether you notice it or if it's just in your head. But he was like, this is better than the one that I have. And so he went out there and he hit it great on the range for the 5 ball. He literally hit 5 balls maybe with it. And as you saw, I think we hit like 1 fairway with the driver, missing it right. And then on the back 9, he tried to overcorrect it and we missed a couple left. But he still, it's funny. On like the 8th hole, he looks over at me, he goes, Jibo. I'm like, yeah, what's up? He's like, I don't think we should have switched to driver heads. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so either. But this is after we were like our 4th miss into the right hay and just scrambling for our lives. But to answer your question, I felt okay because I've seen it several other times. So obviously, it's not like the ideal situation.
I mean, the fact that it was a different loft that's crazy to me, because I've done that before where I've changed the loft a little bit. And obviously, if you take a little loft off, you're like hanging back. You got to hang back just tiny bit. But like your body's used to seeing the face and matching up the way you're striking. And so, man,
No, Bryson's like proprioception, or like everyone likes to say that he's, not really a field player. And I understand more than ever now that he's like the most field player ever, because his body awareness, and you should have seen, he was getting, Dana is his swing coach. Then he's having Sportsbox AI, those people helping him out a lot with his swing, and basically trying to measure, hey, when I'm swinging it really good, what is my body doing? When I'm swinging it really poorly, or if I have that right miss, what am I doing? Then Paul, Jihei and Paul with Sportsbox were there pretty much all week. And even Paul was there on Sunday, and Bryson, for the first 20 minutes we're on the range, was talking to Paul about like how when his center of mass moves back, then his like trail arm externally rotates less, but he needs more for face closure. And I'm like he's using all these terms. I know like half of them now, but the other half I'm just like, I can't believe you're going through this. And then 20 minutes later, we switch to driver head right before you tee off at the 3-shot lead in the US Open. But that's Bryson. Even as a caddy, I've learned more information, the better. You're not going to overwhelm him when it comes to that. And it's just, if I have something in my mind that I feel like he might want to know, I just blurt it out. And 99% of the time, he's like, thank you. Yeah, that's great. I agree. Or I disagree.
Well, Greg, I mean, it's so interesting. We were Andrew and I were talking before you came on, and it wasn't like Bryson played his best golf on Sunday. Now, he got it in, and that's a huge part of being a pro golfer is when you don't have your best stuff, can you still compete? Can you still post a number? Can you still potentially win a big event or win a championship? And obviously, Bryson answered that question. I mean, it was very different than when he won in 2020 when he played the best golf of anybody on Sunday and blew the field out of Winged Foot, right? But there was two things I noticed. Thing number one was early in the round, it seemed like he was getting a little frustrated by the distances the ball was going. It seemed like it was jumping maybe a little more than he wanted with the irons. And I heard him question you a couple times. I think on the 4th hole he asked you, and then you mentioned the tee on 6.
I gave him such a bad club on 4. You got to remember, it's I even said after the round, I'm like, dude, I'm so happy we won. Like, I'm not going to lie. I was thinking about 4 the whole round. I'm like, we cannot lose this by 1 or go into a playoff, because it was a tough call. But on 3, we had played it straight into the wind. It was playing pretty long. And then we were kind of had a tweener on 4, and we couldn't feel as much wind, but it was about 213 or 214 to the flag. So we're in between a full 8-iron and like a chippy 7. But like I said, in that situation, like you have in US Opens, it's difficult to play, and like even caddying is difficult at times, but in those situations you just got to take one less and have them hammer it. Like there's no unless you have some really bad trouble short. And we went with 3/4 7-iron in from 217 into the wind, and it was too much, just because he uses a left dash ball and all that, to where if he chips it a little bit, there's not a lot of spin on his ball. Just and it landed like it looked like it landed just around pin high or just short, and had no chance of staying on. And yeah, it made bogey. And I'm like, man, that's not. I'm like 1 for 2 today so far. 500 batting average is
I'll
not
take
good
that
for a
one.
caddy. Yeah, yeah,
I
I did.
but you know, like it was that moment. But the other thing I kept going back to, and I've talked a lot about this with Bryson, Greg, because I mean, I'll be honest with you. You know, 5, 6 years ago, watching Bryson on the golf course wasn't the easiest experience. I mean, he wasn't always the easiest person to listen to. He would get really frustrated. It has completely flipped. And I've mentioned a lot of this on social media. I mean, watching the way Bryson goes about his business in 2024, it feels like you're watching a whole different golfer. You said it. You guys did not drive the golf ball that well. He put a new driver, head in play. We've already talked about that. But I noticed he never got frustrated. Are you impressed by the fact that even when it's not going his way, he's able to kind of stay even keel and at times even stay positive about the way it's going?
Yeah, I've seen in the last year, I've seen a lot of changes, in Bryson as a person and his character. And the funny story on the first hole, this actually did surprise me a bunch. He looked over and he's like, I forget exactly what he said, but he's basically like, we could shoot 80 or 62 today, and like things are going to be okay. And I was just like, I looked at him, I'm like, that is not what I'm used to hearing out of, because I've when we started, he was struggling, and like there was a lot going on in his life. His dad had just passed. The live thing was in full effect. I wasn't playing great golf, and so I've seen those some of those moments that we've all seen, and I've seen caddying in the same group as him before I even started caddying for him. And when he said that on the first tee, I'm I think he's. It's not like I don't love the whole like it's your time thing or he's ready. Like I knew he was ready. I didn't know if it was our time because Rory could have shot 65 and we could have shot 69, and like it's not our time. It's Rory's
Totally.
time because he shot
Totally.
65. So, but when he said that, I was like, I feel like we're not going to beat ourselves today. And I feel like with Bryson, like he's the last guy who needs a lot of like X's and O's help. My job, I feel like out there is just to be good company, and also just to like Bryson and I are pretty polar opposites when it comes to like how we handle things. There's a lot of things I wish I would handle things the way that Bryson does, but I'm not saying like one's better or the other. But I could see in that when he was in that frame of mind, I'm like, there's times where like Bryson has, gotten his own way. And for him to have that mindset at all, at any time on Sunday, whether it was before or during the round, I was like, this is going to work out just fine. And he showed it. And we were 2 down with 5 holes to go against one of the all-time greats of the game, a guy who's going to coast into the Hall of Fame and be one of the best players to ever live. And you're in the moment, you're like, we need to make 2 or 3 birdies to have a chance. Like you can't count on Rory doing what he did. I mean, obviously he tripped up and Bryson took advantage, but yeah, he's becoming just like he's so mentally strong in some ways, and like we've all seen, like sometimes he's gotten his own way, but now I feel like he's taking that passion that he has and he's like only using it for a lot of good and not really wasting it negatively like he has maybe in the past sometimes.
I had a question because I feel like whenever at least I've been in like a final group, or it's kind of the night before you're preparing for a big moment, a big round, you kind of know that like you're trying to visualize the day, and like you kind of know that at some point there's going to be a moment where things aren't going well, and there's like this wall that you kind of have to like you have to go through, and you have to you have to expect that there's going to be something bad that happens. You got to stay positive and be patient. And like I was curious as a caddy, I mean, this is going to happen, especially at a US Open. There's going to be moments where you got to be so patient. Are there any lines that you have in your mind that you're like pre-rehearsing prior to the round where you're like, I know that this might encourage him, or I know at this point I'm going to use this to kind of motivate him? Do you ever like think through that kind of scenario? Because it always happens, Sunday, there's a moment where you're just like, something's going to go bad, things are going to go to crap, and you're going to feel like the world's spinning. Because I know, on 18 on the bunker shot, you had, a quote people talked about. Are those things that you ever think through, or does that just kind of come out naturally?
Yeah. So on 18, no, that wasn't. There's definitely things. The first part of that question I'll answer is like I love to listen to my players' press conferences. So I listened to every one of Bryson's, and because if you go listen to those, he answers those questions for yourself right then and there. There's so many times in those press conferences where Bryson, hey, he'll say, like when bad things happen, you just got to, think this, this, and that. And so like, I take a mental note of like, here's like, as a caddy, if you're not listening to your players' press conferences, I feel like that's just a cheat code because you literally have the answer that they came up with to this problem, the solution to the problem you will have.
It's really smart.
So, yeah, so there's some things there that I took note of, not necessarily in my yardage book or whatever, but on 18, yeah, we have 52 yards in the clubhouse. It's like every amateur's nightmare. You got the clubhouse window staring at you. And even me, I'm like, if I'm hitting a shot, like I'm probably hitting it 3 feet in front of me because I hit 8 inches behind it. But my fear is to like sail it over into the hotel or the clubhouse there. And so my only thing there was just like, in that situation, I was like, I bet all these guys are human. Andrew, I've heard Tiger Woods talk about, I remember Tiger Woods talked to Tony Finau and I in the car about how he was nervous about blading his bunker shot on 18 at the Tour Championship that he missed. He visualized himself blading his bunker shot into the hedge bushes. So yeah,
strongest mental guy on the planet.
That is 1,000% true. He goes, the first thing I visualized was blading it into the clubhouse, the trees in front of the clubhouse, out of bounds and losing the tournament.
It's unbelievable.
So Andrew, yeah, whether it's you, Andrew, Tiger, or Bryson, I knew like there was probably some time there's some like negative thoughts that were trying to creep into that moment. And I'm sure there's a couple things where he's like, gosh, what if I catch this thin and I hit this 40 yards over the clubhouse? Like you're an inch away from doing that in that situation. And like, I don't think that's abnormal for, where you guys are all humans, to where I've seen him get up and down from some unbelievable spots. Like I've always said, even at the start of the week, I'm like, he's going to chip, and he's going to chip a lot around here because his short game is incredible. And it's one of the most things he's underrated about. But the long story short is that purpose is just like, I want the last thing going through his mind to be visualizing something. Like I wanted him even to think, I said, I believe in you. You got this. I've seen you get up and down from way harder spots. And that's the truth. It's not a bunch, I've seen maybe 4 or 5 where like it would have surprised me more than that one there.
I mean, not to win a U.S. Open, but yeah,
that's the thing. That's the only difference is that
you try to make it not any different.
Yeah, so I almost wanted him to be like, yeah, like okay, that's good. Like he believes in me, like I believe myself in it. Like I wonder what up and downs he's thinking of, and he'll probably go think back to a couple of his best up and downs he's ever had in the last year, and at least maybe that's the last thing that goes through his head before he focuses on trying to get that ball up and down rather than duffing it into the front edge of the bunker we're in or sailing it over the clubhouse.
I mean, it's caddying is such an interesting. So I caddied years ago. I caddied on the LPGA Tour for a couple of friends of mine, and I never realized how much you've got to adapt player to player, person to person, personality to personality. Greg, I mean, this guy Bryson is such a unicorn in professional golf. The way he goes about it, the way he thinks about his equipment, how involved he is in kind of adapting, in real time with his golf game. How much has it been in terms of adapting for you to understand what 10:30 is and what 11 is and what 9:30 is? Like this, the stuff you need to have in your brain versus the stuff you might not need to have in your brain. Like, how has it been evolving in that space over the last 8-9 months?
It's been fun. Andrew probably knows me better than anyone on this earth. And I've always been kind of a numbers geek and nerd when it comes to that. So like that simple, quick math doesn't really, I feel comfortable with that. What's funny is just like Bryson, a lot of people know, whether, okay, when this lie, it comes out a little dead or it comes out hot, or when it's like down grain, it moves a little bit more this way. If it's, if the wind's doing this, like a lot of players know that certain things happen in situations. Bryson just knows why. Like he's actually gone down that rabbit hole to figure out why. And so I remember it was hilarious. The first week I worked for him was Tulsa last year. And it was the second shot of his first hole of me on the bag. And it was like rained a little bit that morning, and it wasn't raining on us, but the golf ball was a little dewy, and there was some water on the dampness on the turf. And he gets up, and I'm thinking like, oh, this is probably a 8-iron. And I didn't say that, but he pops off. He goes, I think it's a perfect 7 because the moisture is going to increase the spin a little bit. I was like, okay, like, why do you say that? He's like, well, he's like, at 45 degrees, when it gets less than 45 degrees, it adds spin to your club. And when it's less than or 45 degrees or more, it decreases spin.
On the
And like
loft
on
of
the
your
way
club?
to the loft of your club. So the fact that, so to answer his, to give you insight, if it was a gap wedge, it actually would knuckle because it doesn't, the friction value on the face or something about that. I forget exactly what it was, but so long story short, if you guys are playing in wet conditions, if you have less than a pitching wedge, so pitching wedge to a lob wedge, your ball will actually knuckle off the face more than likely. If you have more than a pitching wedge down to 5, 6, 7 iron, it will add spin. And so that was kind of like a very eye-opening experience for me during the round on the first hole. And he hit a 7 iron to like 20 feet and barely missed the eagle putt. And that's just tee to green. The stuff on the green is what I really had a hard time picking up because he uses vector putting. Basically, it's aim point on steroids, where aim point was derived from. That was difficult for me to grasp. But I remember even one night I was in Dallas with him, and he was teaching me how vector putting worked till midnight. And now I can kind of see how he reads greens, and we're kind of speaking the same language, I guess, when we're reading putts.
All right. I was curious. I mean, Bryson's obviously has a lot of interesting quirks about him on the course, but is there anything that you've learned off the golf course that you find interesting that Bryson has a wild view about or has surprised you?
A wild view about it. There's a lot of wild takes.
Greg's like, I thought this was only 30 minutes. I didn't know this is a 4-hour podcast.
Let me try to think of the thing with Bryson, here's like a funny one is like I wear sunscreen every day and I use the spray stuff and the fake spray easy stuff. And here's one. There's a lot, but he goes, "Why are you wearing that?" I'm like, "I don't want to get skin cancer." He's like, "Well," he goes, "Do you know what the he basically quoted like an encyclopedia what skin cancer rates have done since sunscreen was invented." And so he went down this tangent about how I'm not saying he doesn't believe in sunscreen. I'm not trying to have that be like the clickbait of this, but he is like, there's a few things, whether it's like zinc or whatever, that he'll use. But he just looked at me dead in the faces last week. He was like, that's a waste of time. I'm like, that's a hot take when it's 93 degrees, literally a hot take when it's 93 degrees and the sun's beating down on you. But he was like, yes, not just to cover my bases. He's like, here's how you protect your skin. Here's how you do this. But he's like, there's a lot of sunscreens that are very bad for you and will increase your chance rather than decrease. So there's one for you. There's a bunch of others, but I will say, there's nothing that he just is saying to say. It's stuff that he will literally quote numbers and data, and whether that stuff's true or not, or where he got that from, I've literally fact checked him on a lot of these things, and it turns out to be true pretty much every time. So,
Greg, he comes off to me as an extremely curious human being, and I think that's probably something all of us should probably be more, is curious. I mean, wanting to learn, you see something and you go, I should learn more about that, and then you never do. Bryson seems like the guy that probably jumps online and digs into, why is that smokestack red and white, versus whatever the case may be. Like, he comes off to me as a curious human.
Yeah. No, it's funny. My wife, we have a 5 and a 7-year-old boy. My wife, Kelsey, was back home, and one of our kids looked at her and was like, "What in the world is wind, Mom?" And my wife, Kelsey, was like, "I have no idea why wind exists. What are we feeling?" So I went over and I asked, she was like, "Ask Bryson." And so I asked him, and something to do with atmospheric pressures and all that colliding. But just to piggyback on what you're saying, it's like, curious is an incredible way to put it, because he will, whether it's with his golf game, that's another thing he told me early on is like, look, I'm here. I'm trying to be the best player I can be. I'm trying to do things for the game that's never been done. I want to figure out the equipment side. I want to do all this. But he's like, I just want to figure out more about the golf swing. Like, I want to figure out like every other sport, it's throw, it's shoot, it's jump, it's pretty self-explanatory things. And then with golf, you get this metal shaft with a lofted club face and this tiny sphere white golf ball, and you're supposed to hit it 300 yards within a 20-yard wide fairway, and then hit it on the green, blah blah blah. He's one of his biggest things going forward is just figuring out more about that. That's why you see him with the sports box people on the range, and he's like, I want to know when I hit it right, is my pelvis, is my pelvis a few degrees this way? Is it my right knee? Is it my left shoulder? Like most of us are like, okay, let's get a stronger grip, and I'm gonna chicken wing this thing through. But he's like, no, I'm gonna find out the root cause, and he will get stuck on those things until he figures out the answer. And that's part of the reason why he's as good as he is.
I mean, I feel like as, playing on the PGA Tour, I feel like there's two types of personalities that fit pretty well. Either like you're extremely smart and you kind of know why you're doing all these things, or you want to be like extremely stupid and like not know anything.
Andrew,
but like
where are you? Where do you?
That middle ground. Well, that middle ground is really dangerous. You're like, enough to be dangerous.
I've
but
caddied for you. I feel like you're a smarter human being than me, but I've caddied for you, and I feel like you almost try to take the approach of like
he tries to dumb it down.
Yeah, is that true?
Well,
I've
tried to. I feel like I either have to go Bryson mode, or I have to feel like I'm just like dumb in the head. And I've taken the more like, just not even gonna think about it, because being in between is just like the worst. It's literally the worst.
you gotta pick one extreme or the other. Greg, I had one more thing, and this was one of the more popular points that were talked about last week at Pinehurst, and it's Bryson's interactions. And one of my buddies who worked in the golf industry for more than a decade is out of the golf industry now. He went out on Thursday, and he sent me a text. He goes, one of the things that stood out to me is how robotic the pro golfers appear to be. And by robotic, he means the way they go about their process. They kind of walk with their head down. There's not a lot of emotional, ups or downs, to Andrew's point earlier about the way people think. It all kind of looks like everybody's kind of trying to be Tiger Light in that sense. And then you get this Bryson DeChambeau dude who's smiling and he's trash talking you and he's high-fiving players. He's got a Sharpie in his back pocket. He's signing stuff mid-round. And I've really been thinking about this the last couple of days, Greg, about how that's probably such a way to get out of the environment for a moment. Do you think that's an extreme benefit to Bryson, where he isn't just serious for 5 hours, where he can smile at a fan or give the fan shit when they're yelling at him about trying to drive 13? Like, do you think it's really beneficial to his mindset on the golf course for that long?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as this. Like, it's easiest to be your own self. And that's exactly who Bryson is. I bet Bryson is muzzling 90% of the things that he wants to do out there when he's playing. Like, if it was up to him, he would just be like, he'd be like Happy Gilmore Volume 2, and just like, so for him, I think what's relieving is like he's tried to be someone different than he is, and that's exhausting. That's what's fun about working with him, is I can be myself, he can be himself to me. Like, as cool as he tries to act sometimes, like, and I include myself in this, like, we're both just kind of a couple dorks that, and he just happens to be one of the best golfers in the world that hits it 360 down the middle on most shots and thinks things through more than anyone. And so I think that's what you're seeing with him and in his YouTube. Like, YouTube's not like what's changed people's perception. It just is like it's just a direct look into who he is as a person, like, without, like, you see how he acts in YouTube matches. That's who Bryson is, like, at the core. And he lets it out every once in a while on the course. And he'll say, like, please don't boo me or whatever, and all this crazy stuff. But I think that's been really a big part of kind of like his way of getting back into having people understand who he is. It's just literally being himself. It's exhausting trying to be someone else.
I've seen that before, because like I got paired with him and Rory. I remember I was an alternate a Riviera, and like I was actually staying with you that week. Yeah. And I saw the tee time coming. I'm like, oh crap! I'm playing. I was going from not in the field.
You're
to
just doing squats.
Rory
like,
and Bryson. I'm like, oh no. Ended up actually beating both of them, but
nice.
I remember that.
I remember Bryson. I remember like he was getting so mad. I mean, he was hitting it all over the place, and his driver was causing him issues. And I remember we got on number 9, and my caddy said something to him like, Bryson, you gonna try to swing hard at this one?
Oh,
And he
it's a
got up
wrap.
there and he's like, oh man, like as like a little like a kid, like kid in a candy store is like, oh, I'm gonna smash this one. And he starts doing all these big fast practice swings. And I'm like
Breathing deep. Yeah.
breathing deep, and I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, but like that's who he kind of. I felt like he was playing bad as a missed the cut, and then like his true self kind of came out and he had fun. He
Yeah.
smashed it 400 yards, but way right. But he was like, I don't know. I was like, this is incredible. This is like one of the best golfers in the world.
Over there. He was probably in the middle of 10 fairway.
That's right.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. Like I'm trying to act like, Mr. Cool Guy because I'm playing with these, Rory and Bryson, and I see Bryson do that. I'm just like, wow, like people aren't who they always think they are, like inside the ropes.
It's probably like if he doesn't engage with fans and have conversations and like say weird, funny stuff, like he probably has to direct his energy somewhere else. Like he's not going to be stoic. So it's like either I'm going to rage or I'm going to just be super goofy and like talk to everyone and be like kind of a weirdo. And that's what I love about him too. Cause like I said, that's, I see myself a little bit the same way in that regard as well. But for him, it's like he's even said like, I can't just like hold it in. Like I think he has so much emotion and passion that it's got to manifest some way. And luckily he's played a lot of golf, and there's been a lot of times where like golf hasn't been great, and like he takes that seriously too. And it's not like he's just happy go lucky all the time. I'll tell him, I'm like, get it out of your system. Like say what you got to say, do what you got to do. But like until we get like going throughout the round, I always just remind him, like, dude, no rearview mirror. Like you can be as mad as you want. Even after the round, we'll have some bad rounds. And I'll tell him, I'm like, dude, just go hit your driver as hard as you can for 20 minutes straight, or your 7-iron. And like, he'll literally like, he'll do that sometimes. And he'll be like, dude, 202 ball speed. I'm like, dude, that's freaking awesome. Like,
what did we shoot? I don't even remember what we shot.
You're not mad. I remember in Saudi, at the Saudi International, it was we shot like 73. It was like it was so bad. Like I did such a bad job. He wasn't playing good. Like we got so many bad breaks, and he just went to the range after the round. He just hammered balls for 30 minutes. Then he felt better, and he got like 205, 206 ball speed, and he was like, "Dude, that's sick." And I'm like, "Yeah, that was really cool." And then he just like worked on his game for 10 minutes, and we walked off.
Greg, this has been great. This has been amazing. You're incredible to chat with. I was impressed with you on the bag, and I've been very impressed with you on the mic. I got to ask you this: Bryson makes the putt to win the U.S. Open, and he's going ape shit on the green. How nervous were you for the hug? Because you know that big guy's coming your way.
Yeah, I'm 6'4", 220, so I can handle it.
Okay, you're not worried about it. I got you.
Yeah, no, man, that was, obviously he went on live a couple of times last year, but like the last, I caddied for Tony in his win in 2016, and then, won a couple of times with Bryson. But yeah, that was a very meaningful week last week. And I've had a lot going on in my life the last year or two, a lot of great things and a lot of tough things. And Bryson's it's been unbelievable how it's all worked out, and just kind of the friend that he's become to me, and how well he treats me, the relationship we have. And then just for him to play well and win a major and just kind of be on the track he's on right now, it's hard to imagine. And so I knew he was coming in hot, but like I said, luckily I got a little meat behind me too. But at the same time, I couldn't believe what it felt like 30 minutes before we were down by 2 on the 13th tee. And I'm a very half full positive guy. And I was like, man, this is going to be difficult. And like, we need to like play really good golf and hope that Rory doesn't go off. And because if Rory's up 2 and he goes off, we can't catch him. And
right.
Luckily it all worked out the way it did. I feel bad for, I like Harry a lot. Obviously Rory's, like I said, he's going to be one of the best to ever play. But that it essentially came down to 18. Rory had his pitch shot from short of the green, and Bryson had his bunker shot, and Rory didn't get it up and down, and Bryson did. And that was the difference. So that's what you hope for in those situations, and Bryson earned it, and Rory, acknowledged that. And, but it probably won't be the last time that those two guys kind of go toe to toe, on the back nine of a major.
Andrew, you got anything else for Greg?
Pretty good.
I got to give a shout out to Andrew. I got to give a shout out to Andrew though, because I constantly remind him of this, and he probably doesn't want to take credit, but I don't know how many people know that I started caddying with Andrew when he was a rookie on the Corn Ferry. So Andrew and I are cousins, and we always talked about like me caddying for him growing up. I'd caddy for him in the U.S. Junior when we're both like 14 years old, and I'd caddy for him in all the AM stuff. And so obviously I had to do my part and I couldn't suck at what I do or else I was never going to move forward in my career as a caddy. But Andrew was the gateway. And so big shout out to Andrew for getting me into the loop as far as a caddy goes.
After that first year, on like a 5% retainer, would have been
rich.
I
know. Hey, if I let you go out of this contract, after the first. That was honestly one of my more fun years caddying is that first year, even though it was a grind and, the web.com is a great tour, but it's not quite what you all imagine professional golf to be, but it's fun to share that year with him. And just, it's crazy that 10, 12 years later that Andrew's still doing his thing and I'm still caddying somehow, some way, but it's all worked out really in a cool way.
Andrew, how was Greg as your caddy? Was he dialed? Was he locked in? Like, did he have any miscues? Did he miss club you a couple times early?
You can be honest for sure.
No, he was pretty good. I mean, we were both pretty raw professionally back then. I mean, my temper was a little shorter.
Yep.
Greg had some funny quirks about him. He wasn't as laid back. I remember him like charging ahead, looking for the ball. He just was a little more anxious back then, but I think we both chilled out a little over the last 12 years.
Yeah, it was the blind leading the blind that year for sure. But you played some good golf, and it was a learning experience, but it was a fun one. Just having a familiar face. I probably would have never caddied on the Corn Ferry if it wasn't for someone that I was close with or had family with. But yeah, we were both. It was rough. I do remember. I look at some of my old yardage books, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was giving you nothing out there. Like I was not prepared. But it was a learning process for both of us. Yeah.
Greg, the first time I caddied, I remember it was Thursday, like opening round, and I'm watching the other caddies walking off spots. And I was thinking, I'm like, what the hell are these guys doing? And it took me till Saturday to realize they're walking off the next day's hole location. Yeah. And then I realized Sunday's the easiest day to be a caddy because you don't have to think about the next day. It's so funny.
Exactly. I don't even have the chance to do that. I don't even have the chance to do that, which is like kind of stinks, but it's also kind of nice because I'm over there trying to grind to figure out if it's down, across at 1.5% at the 30 or 45 degree angle or whatever, to where I'm like, I've completely given up on that. And I'm like, as long as I just do my job that I'm there for at the time, we got pin sheets. So that works good enough for me.
Yep. Fire sweatshirt, by the way, Greg. Just absolute
Thank
fire.
You. Right?
Unbelievable.
Not
bad, huh? Augusta National hoodie, the full settled green. Listen, next year you're at the Masters, 2025 Masters. You're leading by 2 on Sunday. You're at the tournament practice facility, and Bryson looks over and says, I'm thinking about a new head. What does Greg say back? Would stick with Bryson, what got us here? Just go with Bryson's word.
Whatever. I mean, at that point in time, you got to just go with what the boss wants. And if he thinks it's better for a new head, at least
he doesn't have that veto power, Shane.
I know. I was in the media center when he said that, and I tried to act like I gave him a hard time, but it's definitely true. Like I kind of see myself as like his little bumpers for like at a bowling alley, but in between those bumpers, like Bryson, obviously he's going to do whatever he wants to do, and for good reason. He's earned it, and he's he's a good enough player, and I don't try to act like I have any sort of that power. I'm just happy to be along for the ride.
Well, we appreciate it, Greg. Thanks for the chat. Thanks so much for the insight. Congrats again on the great week. It was so much fun to watch. Andrew, play well this week. Have some fun. The Wi-Fi was incredible. You must be at a hotel. You got to be there. You got to be dialed at a hotel this week.
The Residence Inn. We're good to go this week.
This is the Connecticut Wi-Fi is going to work. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it. We'll be back next week to recap Andrew's week at the Travelers. Greg, thanks again for the time, and we'll check back with you guys soon. Thanks so much.
Sounds good. Yep.
Thanks, fellas.
Enjoyed it.